Her parents spent their life savings on that house. Every square foot, paid in full, titled in her name alone, was their way of saying, no matter what happens, you will always have a place to stand. They never imagined their son-in-law would tour it like a landlord 3 months after the wedding. When Jessica called her mother that evening, back pressed against a locked door, hands shaking, her husband still shouting outside, she almost kept lying. She had been lying for 3 months, telling her parents everything was fine, that Brian was wonderful, that her mother-in-law was just old-fashioned. She had convinced herself she was being mature. But the moment her mother asked, "Is Brian's family making a move on the house?" and Jessica went silent, everything she had been hiding came rushing to the surface. What followed was not just a divorce. It was a woman waking up, learning that protecting yourself is not selfishness, learning that the law doesn't care about guilt trips, tearful apologies, or 6-year-old boys used as pawns, and learning that walking away from the wrong person is sometimes the bravest and most loving thing you can do for yourself. You deserve to know this story. Watch until the end. Like, comment, share, and subscribe if it speaks to you. This content was manually researched, developed, and edited by our team with the intention of delivering meaningful stories and real-life lessons to our audience.
I pegged Sharon Collins as trouble from day one. I saw it in her eyes when she asked about our properties, a ledger flipping behind her smile. But Jess was happy, so I bit my tongue. Then she called, and I heard that same cold math in her breaking voice. "He's giving them our bedroom, Dad." He wasn't a husband. He was his mother's son playing house, and I was the fool who handed him my daughter. A hot, stupid anger burned in my gut. She told me how Sharon criticized her over a tray of drinks. It wasn't about the noise. It was a quiet little power move, a reminder of who was really running the show in my daughter's home. Then came the comment on her expensive china. Not a compliment, an appraisal. They were taking inventory. I saw Jesse's face in my mind, the horror dawning. I grabbed my keys. Their bedroom, the one with all the morning light. I pictured them strolling through it as if it were theirs, while my daughter was made a stranger in her own life. That quiet wasn't peace. It was erasure. The nephew gets the office. To them, her home wasn't a sanctuary. It was just a collection of assets waiting to be assigned, a hostile takeover disguised as family obligation. For 2 hours, I just drove. Silence. Every mile was another chance I'd had to warn her, thrown away. His lie, just for a little while, played on a loop in my head. Liar. I could almost hear his tone, that phony, patient voice he used. "It's a big house, Jess." He wasn't being logical. He was trying to make my daughter feel unreasonable for wanting her own home. But then her voice sharpened. She pushed back, and his mother snapped at her for her tone. Right then, a fierce pride cut through my rage. "That's my girl. She's fighting. His family is your family." I squeezed the wheel. Sharon wasn't building bridges. She was mounting an invasion. All those friendly questions had just been scouting the terrain. Then Jessie mentioned the long con she'd overheard about credit. My gut clenched. I'd let these wolves into her life. They weren't in-laws, they were parasites. Brian's talk of family and duty was a twisted joke. He didn't want her to have a bigger heart. He wanted her to burn herself to the ground to keep his family warm. "You need to fix your attitude." Someone said that to my daughter. My foot went down on the gas. They saw her kindness as a weakness, something to be exploited. Her voice came through the phone, steady and clear. "This is my house." It was a statement of fact, not a question. She was drawing a line, and I was already on the highway to stand right behind her. "What's yours is mine," was his reply. I'd pegged him as a weak, entitled kid from day one. He never valued anything, least of all the woman I'd raised. That laugh she described, raw and ugly, that wasn't my Jessie. That was the sound of a woman cornered by cheats, finally baring her teeth. In that moment, picturing their stunned faces, my little girl became the warrior I raised her to be. They were shocked she wasn't a pushover. That told me everything. "So we should add my parents to your condo deed, right?" Pure genius. My daughter, turning their own rotten logic back on them like a weapon. It was beautiful. Mentioning the school district was the kill shot. She wasn't just defending her home, she was exposing their whole grubby scheme, holding a mirror up to them. I pulled up, and there they were, Brian and his father. My son-in-law's face was a mess of fury as he yelled, "Calculating?" at my daughter. My car door slammed, cracking the suburban silence. I heard Sharon's voice tremble. "We thought you were a respectable girl." The nerve. To them, respect meant obedience. My daughter had just failed their test in the most magnificent way. I walked up and stood next to Jess on her porch. Brian muttered, "Fine." His eyes met mine for a second, then darted away. He couldn't look at me. He knew. I didn't need to say a word. He was still whining about some free housing scheme. Empty words. He'd been caught, his game completely dismantled by the one person he was stupid enough to underestimate. Jessica stood there, straight and solid. "The tour's over," she said, her voice like crystal. She looked at me, and I gave her a short, firm nod. "I'm here. I've got you." The lock clicked behind us. I didn't watch his mother's performance on the lawn. I just put my arm around my daughter. The silence inside was real this time. It was safe. We heard them yelling outside for a bit. I knew she was no good. The last cry of a man who knows he's been beaten completely and utterly. I felt her shoulders tremble under my arm, and a cold, quiet rage settled deep in my chest. They weren't sorry. They were just pissed their con had failed. I remembered her parents at the rehearsal dinner. The look they gave Sharon. I dismissed it as wedding jitters. I see now it was recognition. They knew what they were looking at. Their scheme to build a family fortress just shattered my daughter's peace. But Brian lost his own marriage. He dismantled it himself, lie by lie. It was always about the house, not a home, a property, not a wife, an asset. Now I finally understood that look in Sharon's eyes. It wasn't simple curiosity. It was pure, predatory ambition. She was sizing up the prize. We built our family on love and gave our daughter the tools to be strong. Their family was built on scheming. It was never a fair fight, but they were the ones who were outmatched. She had the law, the house, and me. Brian was left standing on the lawn with nothing but the fallout from his mother's greedy, catastrophic plan. They probably thought they married a solution, an easy mark. They never realized they were picking a fight. Standing with my daughter, I saw the scheming look gone from Brian's face, just empty defeat. They'll tell themselves they meant well, but my daughter's home was never theirs to take, and it sure as hell wasn't some blessing for them to claim as their own. Brian's father started toward the porch, his face arranged in a mask of regret. I took one step forward, that's all. I just looked at him. He stopped cold. He knew. It was done. I didn't know about the calls she'd been ignoring, but seeing the steel in her spine now, I knew she had faced down a kind of casual cruelty I couldn't fathom, and she had won. From the moment I met his mother, Sharon, I had a bad feeling. Her eyes were doing a financial audit on me. But Jessie loved him, so I said nothing. I told myself to trust my daughter's heart. It was a profound mistake on my part. 90 days later, my phone rang. It was my daughter, and her voice was diamond hard. She explained their entire rotten game to me. It was happening, just like I knew it would. The 2-hour drive felt like an eternity in silence. Every mile marker was a monument to my failure. I should have said something. Why the hell didn't I? But seeing her face, the guilt just dissolved. She looked tired, but her spirit wasn't broken. A wave of pure, fierce pride washed over me. That was my kid, holding her own. She wasn't building a fortress around herself. She was drawing a line in the sand. The difference between what was hers and what they wanted. His version of love always had a price tag. Then came their pathetic, predictable performance. We saw Brian's whole act from the window. Predictably, his sister was the next call. Jess ended the call and blocked the number. I just gave her a nod. Nothing needed to be said. They showed up with the sunrise. His mother, the sister, and their poor kid. Jess made them wait on the porch for a while. When she opened the door, she was stone cold. Their voices were high-pitched and demanding. She let them in. I stayed back, just watching. Sharon asking about my property finally made sense. Sharon went straight for my daughter's integrity. Jess hit back with cold legal reality. It was a wall of facts they couldn't get through. Then Sharon's words turned truly vicious. She laid out her version of a generous deal. Jess asked one thing: for how long? They had no answer for that simple question. My daughter had kept every single receipt. She took their flimsy arguments apart piece by piece. Using their own kid as a key, that was low. Jess told me he ran in yelling about living there. She had to explain to a child that his family was using him. That boy thought he'd found a home. Instead, his own grandmother aimed him at Jess's heart like a battering ram. It was a sick thing to do to a child. When the boy cried, his aunt just yanked him away. Then Sharon announced they were moving in, a demand, not a question. Hearing it made my blood run cold. The threats came next. How difficult she could be, how Brian would leave her, anything to break her will. And I just thought, I should have stopped this. For them, family was a one-way transaction. A wife gives, the in-laws take. It was Jess's final chance to just roll over and surrender her life. So Jessica just opened the front door for them, told Sharon to leave her house, threw the word divorce right back in her face. Hearing that, I knew my daughter was back. The sister's parting shot was, "You'll regret this." Jess's reply made me proud. "I only regret your family." Sharon sank to the couch, refusing to move. That's when my daughter pulled out her phone with 911 ready. Having to do that in her own home, that's a parent's worst nightmare. "I'm counting to 3, she told them. I can hear the steel in her voice. They finally left, screaming names at my kid for standing up for herself. That 2-hour drive was the longest of my life. Every minute was filled with the warnings I never gave, the doubts I buried to trust my daughter's heart. Brian called while I was on my way. He sounded lost. He'd only heard his mother's side, and I'm sure she painted herself as a saint. But after talking to Jess, his story began to fray. You could hear him realizing his mother's needs sounded more like a goddamn shakedown. They'd made family sound like a bill to be paid. But Jess just showed him the receipts. Every bit of their help was another string attached. It was like watching a man come to after a long slumber. His mother's logic began to sound thin, hollow. He was finally seeing past the fog of obligation he was raised in. "Did you ever see me as your family?" Jess asked. It wasn't self-pity, it was the sound of a heart finding out if it was a partner or just a portfolio. She wasn't the one who turned love into a transaction. She just held up the invoice his family had been charging her from the start. The true cost of their name. Even a gold bracelet he'd given her. His mother had it on a ledger. A gift from a son, repurposed into a liability for my daughter. It was all business. She had to ask him, "What am I to you?" Right after his own mother tried to move in on her home. That the question even existed says it all. When I finally saw Brian, his voice was empty. He knew it was done. Jess made the choice, but his mother was the one who forced her hand. He had to pick a side, the family he was born with or the one he chose. His mother drew the line, and in doing so, she guaranteed he'd step over it. Sharon told him Jessica laughed. I know my daughters laugh. That wasn't victory. That was the sound of disbelief that things had gotten so broken. His mother gave him 1 day to fall back in line. Jessica just gave him a choice. Be a husband or stay a son. His mother didn't cut Jess out. She just handed Brian the scissors. The phone calls ended. Sitting in Jess's house that night, it finally crystallized. Sharon came to claim territory and instead gave my daughter the will to burn the map. All I had was my pride and my regret. I overheard Jess on the phone. She wasn't painting a caricature. She just described a woman so lost in her own wants she couldn't see the damage in her wake. She used the word ambush, and it fit perfectly. She said their family's love felt like a debt she would never be able to clear. Her friend said she was right, that expecting to move your parents in isn't normal, that she had a right to be the priority. It was good to hear it from someone else. We changed the locks. We packed his clothes. It wasn't revenge. It was the quiet, sad work of closing a chapter. We were giving our daughter her home back. And of course, we called a lawyer. When people treat a marriage like a corporate merger, you get representation. It wasn't about fighting. It was about being smart. She called me, voice trembling but solid. Dad, the locks are changed. I felt a knot I'd been carrying for years finally loosen. That's my girl. The first step. My wife and I drove down, not to add fuel to the fire, but to be the wall at her back. I knew that boy's family was trouble from day one, and I've hated myself for not saying more ever since. Then his father, George, appeared on her porch, acting like he had a key. He wasn't there to mediate, he was there to enforce. It was a power play. He kept repeating, "We're a family." What I heard was, "You have things we want, and we're using the word family as our leverage." He left saying we'd treated him like a criminal. I never raised my voice, I just sat in a chair in her living room. Sometimes stillness has more weight than noise. He hated that. He accused Jess of calling Brian a leech. She never did. She just asked a simple question about whether a marriage can survive being drained by one family. He had no reply. They never understood. We raised a partner, not a host. They saw her boundaries as coldness because they don't know the difference between strength and cruelty. I heard her say it to him on the phone. "You didn't marry me, you married my townhouse." The pain in her voice was staggering. The moment she knew. I see it all clearly now. Every gift from Sharon wasn't a gift, it was an investment. She was keeping score and she had decided it was time to collect. When they mentioned lawyers, I felt a wave of relief. Good. Now we deal with what's legal, not with these twisted emotional demands they call family. Brian returned with his father. George was carrying a fruit basket, a ridiculous peace offering, as if some oranges and grapes could patch the hole they blew in my daughter's life. It wasn't an ambush, it was a boundary being enforced. My wife just looked at that basket and asked, "George, what is this really about?" The silence was his answer. They can call me a coward for being quiet. I call it trusting my daughter. I wasn't there to speak for her. I was there to remind them whose daughter she is. Jessica called him Mr. Collins. It wasn't an insult, it was a clarification. You are a guest in this house, and your visit is over. My wife asked Brian if he thought asking Jess to carry his entire family was fair. They took it as an attack. To me, it sounded like a reasonable question. Jess asked if this was all about money. Her voice cracked. She wasn't throwing stones. She was asking if the last few years of her life had been a complete lie. George lectured about a son's loyalty to his parents. I watched Brian's face as the truth landed. His father's definition of loyalty was about to cost him his wife. To them, my daughter was an asset. Their idea of family was just a hostile takeover hiding behind vows and a wedding ring. I watched my girl finally ask the hard question. The old man's shock wasn't hurt feelings. It was the pure rage of a predator, finally cornered. They were furious when she called them on their entitlement. They had already mentally redecorated her house and couldn't believe she had the nerve to notice. Then came the big performance, the sudden clutching of the chest. It was a weak, transparent play for sympathy, and Brian bought it completely. She kept asking them why her house was the only option. The answer was simple: greed. Their practical solution was just the easiest way to get their hands on her life. I was so proud watching her list every single dollar. It wasn't an attack, it was an audit. She was showing them the line items of their own con. When I spoke, my voice was low. I looked that man in the eyes and just said, "It's over." He took it as a threat. It was a statement of fact. I asked him if he would have married her if she was poor. He had no answer. That silence was all the confirmation I'd needed since the day I met his mother. I watched Brian start to plead, trying to salvage the arrangement. My daughter just stood there, straight and tall. She wasn't cold. She was finally free. He was asked if he married her for love. He talked about stability and a future. All of it was just code for her bank account, a business deal. She told him precisely what he was, spineless and greedy. She wasn't attacking him. She was holding up a mirror, and he hated the man looking back. "You love what I provide." That one sentence hit him like a physical blow. It was the plain truth, and against the truth, he had absolutely no defense. My daughter told them to get out of her house. Seeing the shock on George's face, a man who'd never been denied a thing was a start. On the way out, he called my Jessica damaged goods. That wasn't pain speaking. It was the impotent fury of a leech being peeled off. Jess never even blinked. She said quietly that Brian was the one nobody would want. It wasn't an attack. It was a simple fact. Those 2 hours I spent driving to her felt like a lifetime. All I could picture were his mother's eyes sizing me up. I should have trusted my gut right then. Now their avarice is being turned into legal filings. Their so-called hope for the future was nothing but a calculated mugging from day one. They're weaponizing my daughter's good nature. Every check she ever wrote wasn't help in their eyes. It was just a line of credit. His mother wailed about some fancy bracelet. She never saw a gift, only its value, just another number to add to their assets. I won't forget George's expression after I had my say. It wasn't embarrassment. It was the flat shock of a card sharp whose bluff had just been called. Their whole plan was to annex my daughter's life. It only cost them their son because it showed everyone what he'd been all along. I got the call from Brian, his voice hollow. He said she'd kicked him out. Good. Her friend Olivia had finally made her see clearly. They talked about wanting to be a family. They wanted to be dependents, to hang on her until she buckled. That's not family, it's an anchor. The fact she had a life of her own was something they couldn't stomach. The only real parasite was the entitlement his parents had drilled into him. They're calling it a setup. I call it waking the hell up. My girl wasn't supporting family, she was enabling users. That had to end. It was never about the money for Jess. It was about respect, a concept they were incapable of understanding. The law was on her side because the truth was. He whined that she was laughing at him. She wasn't laughing at his pain, she was laughing at the sheer nerve of his failed con. I knew he would drag his feet. A cornered animal is a desperate one. He wasn't a husband saving a marriage. He was a sore loser. She needed it over quickly. You don't excise a cancer in stages. That formal letter from the lawyer was a kindness he didn't earn. I'm guessing her friend Olivia told her to serve the papers at his job. It wasn't spiteful. It was smart. A clean, undeniable end. She stayed put while he packed. It was her house. She was making a point. Their home didn't exist because the marriage never had. My daughter was taking her property back, and he was being evicted. He could keep the keys. My girl was taking her life back. He pleaded for one last chance to talk, one more shot at twisting her up. I'm just so glad she was wise to his games. She had me, her friend, and her lawyer. She had support. He just had the family that taught him to be a taker. He sent her texts filled with what he probably thought was remorse. It was just more manipulation. Blocking him was the best move she made. His texts said, "I love you," but his meaning was, "I love your assets." They didn't want to share a life. They wanted her to sign hers over. He showed up at her door with roses, a beautiful, empty performance, a last-ditch effort to play a part he'd never even memorized. She wouldn't let him inside. He stood on the curb because that's where he belonged now, outside the borders of her life. She looked at those flowers and just said no. That single word was a fortress. He was offering a stage prop and she refused to act in his scene. When he reached for her hand, she pulled it away. She was no longer his to touch. He apologized for his mother's plot, playing the martyr. "Is that all?" she asked him, her voice perfectly level. She was through with the melodrama, through with his pathetic bids for pity. He tried to push past her to have the final argument in the house she owned. Jess shut him down. "It's not your home anymore." Each word was a brick in the wall. She'd already had the locks changed and his stuff boxed up. And when he asked if she ever loved him, her laughter was the sound of a woman who finally got the joke. He called her strength bullying. He saw her finally walking away as some kind of trick. The man still had no clue. "Do you think I'm an idiot?" she asked, and I knew she wasn't. My daughter was a survivor. She remembered every receipt, and she was finally closing his account. The Collins family treated my daughter's goodwill like an open bar. Her money covered his sister's college, his father's prescriptions. Jess wasn't keeping score. She was just trying to breathe. When she finally told them, "I'm done," they looked at her like she'd desecrated a church. Done with what? Being their private foundation? That's when I knew they'd never seen her as a person. So she hired an attorney. It was the only card she had left to play. After everything she poured into them, they had the gall to act like she was the one abandoning him. I heard he cried to her on the phone. It wasn't a broken heart. It was the sound of a trust fund baby panicking. He said she forced his hand. His own greed forced his hand. Next, he threatened her. Said he'd ruin her reputation at work, call her a cheat. It was the ugly sound of a man who had nothing left to lose because he'd never earned anything. When she wouldn't cave, he ran to his mother. Then my phone rang. It was Jessica, her voice just a shell. I was in my truck minutes later. The 2-hour drive to her was the quietest, heaviest drive of my life. This was far from over. A few days after, his mother and sister decided to show up for a chat. It wasn't a chat. It was a planned assault. A family matter, they insisted, so no lawyers. They liked to handle things their way. They weren't there to reason. They were there to strong-arm her back into compliance. Later, they'd claim they were just emotional. I'd call it menacing. They were trying to rescue their cash flow, not a marriage. Sharon Collins loved to tell people Jessica thought she was better than them. It was a convenient lie. My daughter simply didn't understand them because they measured a person's soul with a dollar sign. Of course, she kept the door locked. She was inside, terrified, while they hammered on it. She was on the phone with me the whole time. His sister called her a witch. No, she was a prisoner in her own home. His sister claimed later she'd only knocked loudly. Jessica told me it sounded like they were trying to splinter the door. They weren't trying to talk. They were trying to break her. The building manager called the police. I could have kissed that man. They called it humiliating. I call it what happens when you lay siege to my daughter's home. She called them thieves. She was right. That title, mother-in-law, meant nothing. They deserved that shame. Jess didn't. Her parting shot was a threat. He used his own mother as an excuse. $50,000. It was a shakedown. He threatened her with continued harassment. She called him shameless. My silence cost her. His mother's words from his mouth. They never guessed she'd record the call. Their entitlement to her money was disgusting. This was extortion, not a family matter. The order meant one thing: stay away. It was always a hostile negotiation for them. I told her, well, come home. It was a lifeline. That house wasn't a home, but a leash. My instructions were simple. Keep her safe. I made the calls. They were a threat. That protective order was my peace of mind. I drove her home. We sold it to free her. Selling it removed the target on her back. For her, the house had become a cage. Forget their peace. We were getting her life back. Scorch the earth, I told her. She was a survivor. Selling the house was her final victory. We were proud she refused to be destroyed. Sarah held our daughter. He needed a mother. We weren't planning a war, but a future. Her voice was steady when she told him, in control. Cut every tie, leave nothing on the table. He severely underestimated his wife's strength. $1.5 million meant nothing. I saw it in his mother's eyes. I said nothing. Her voice was brittle. She was building a fortress. Her moves weren't crazy, but surgical. I was proud. He felt entitled to her car for safety. She sold it for $20,000, another wall built. It hurt to watch, but damn, I was proud. They only understood greed, not decency. They called her cruel. She was being smart. When she recorded him, I knew she was a fighter. Our house, he'd say, it was never his. They came for his condo. My silence failed her. That 2-hour drive was my failure on a loop. Their only principle came with a dollar sign. We sat on her sofa later, the air thick with unspoken pain. She told me they'd called her a monster, those people, calling my daughter a monster. My hands clenched in my lap. The story about her being broke was a dead giveaway. We don't go broke. It was a cheap lie to frame her as the bad guy while they tried to bleed her dry. His name lit up her phone again and again. I watched her stony face as she ignored it. Every one of his apologies was just another key, looking for a lock to pick. He offered to cut them off, his own family. A meaningless sacrifice to a woman who just wanted him gone. It was too little, far too late. If I came into millions, you'd be begging, she told him. And that was it, the rotten core of it all. It was always about the money. I knew it from that first handshake. That evening, I called my brother. I'm going over, I said. This is ending. My voice wasn't angry. It was heavy. I was done watching this from a distance. The rumors they started were textbook. A failed business, financial ruin, anything to make them the victims. It was a masterclass in cowardice. To hear they called her their piggy bank was sickening. They were the ones playing poor with their hands out while my daughter fought for her own name. His mother, or maybe his sister, called with a fake offer of support, just a pathetic attempt to gauge if their smear campaign was working. They were worried about their reputation. I had to laugh. Who ends up looking worse? I said to my wife. The one who leaves, or the ones who tried to cage her? They thought this was a squabble over cash. They never once understood my daughter was fighting for her life. This wasn't checkers. This was chess. Using sad stories to turn people against her was a classic, nasty move. Isolate her. Make her the villain. It's an old trick, and it never holds. I heard about your little problem, one of them said to her, the condescension dripping from the phone. They still saw her as a child to be managed. And Jess just laughed. When she told me, I felt my chest swell with pride. She wasn't their prey. They'd built a trap and walked right into it themselves. Then came the demand for $5,000. Payment for the trouble of trying to ruin her. The sheer nerve of it was breathtaking. When she refused, the price went up to $10,000 for his humiliation. I saw his mother's face in my mind, that calculating glint in her eyes. This was her plan. They called $10,000 the price for a clean break. I called it what it was, extortion, wrapped in a victim complex. Threatening to tell us was their last desperate move, as if we weren't her staunchest allies. We taught her how to handle bullies. They had nothing. They brought up lawyers hoping to scare her into submission. It did the opposite. It didn't break her. It forged her. But going after his own condo, that was their final mistake. That was his before he ever met her. That's when the talking was done. I got in my truck. The term community asset was just poison. They'd drain their own son to get at her, and they didn't care about the wreckage. Her spine had turned to absolute steel. My sweet girl was a woman of iron now, forged in their fire. They had no idea who they were up against. He was a no-show at the courthouse, but it didn't matter. I was there right beside her. Let them come. Let them see us standing together. She had offered to meet to settle this quietly. He refused, wanting the drama of a courtroom. It's a spectacle he was never going to get. We stood on the courthouse steps when Brian and his father finally appeared. They stopped short when they saw me. I said nothing. I just held their gaze. They looked from me to my daughter, standing tall next to me, and the fight just drained out of them. They knew it was over. I put my arm around her, and we left them there. My phone rang, and I heard the tremor in Jessica's voice. They'd shoved the building's guard. I could hear Brian trying to pass it off as a family issue. I was in my truck before we even hung up, a 2-hour drive powered by silent regret. When I got there, he was trying to use his mother as a shield. Under the glare of the station lights, I saw something in her face finally settle. She had been the one holding it all together, and she was finally letting go. His father wanted a quiet deal. It was plain on his face. But they didn't show up at her home for a quiet talk. They showed up with demands and gave her a reason to leave. I heard him call her heartless. I looked at my daughter, standing so straight, and knew he was a fool. She wasn't losing. She was winning her whole life back. His dad kept calling it a family discussion. Breaking and entering isn't a discussion. They underestimated her. That was their first and last mistake. She swore she wouldn't break, and my presence was just a silent amen to that. I looked at that boy and his father and knew they never really saw her at all. Brian reached for her, still pleading his case. She flinched away like she'd been burned. He failed to stand up for her, and that's where he lost her. Is assaulting someone a little argument? Her voice cut through his whining. I stood behind her, a silent anchor, prouder than I'd ever been. I walked right past Brian as if he were invisible. Let him feel it for once. Inside, the security guard was giving his statement. "My name is Jessica Miller," she said, her voice solid as oak. She looked right at his mother, former mother-in-law. That one word tore their whole fiction apart. "I will not mediate," she stated, plain and simple. They looked floored. They thought they still had a say. For her, this was a period at the end of a sentence. Sharon started to cry. I remembered her asking me about property values. Those weren't tears of loss. They were the tears of a bad investment. She told the officer the simple truth. They came to her home. They harassed her. They weren't trapped. They were trespassing. The security cameras caught everything. Best investment I ever made. They gave my daughter the proof she needed to finally lock this chapter. When the officer mentioned holding cells, his sister looked terrified. A kid caught in her family's storm. But it wasn't Jessica's job to save her. Jessica just looked at them all, her expression unreadable. I warned you. I knew she had. They just never believed she had the strength to mean it. He called her cruel, and I felt it in my chest. She wasn't being cruel. She was saving her own life. He punched the wall, a pathetic show. 5 to 10 days, the cop said. The number meant nothing. Then Brian went to his knees. Not for her, for them. I knew right then he'd never be enough for her. He put his forehead on the station floor. She just asked if this was the life he really wanted. Then she took out the papers. My girl came prepared. All the fear I had for her just vanished. He signed it all away for his family. The order wasn't for punishment. It was for her peace. The guard's bill was about consequences, a lesson they'd never learn. It was never about the cash. They got a record, paid $200. After a lecture, they were gone. I was just there for my daughter. She spoke to him like a stranger. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. He'd broken something inside her for good. Don't be late, she said. He mentioned some debt, searching for a crack in her resolve. He found nothing. That debt was a lie. My problem now, she said, you're not. I saw the son he was, and the woman she'd become. After tomorrow, we're strangers. The words were final. She walked out, and I put my arm around her. Free. I'm sure they have names for us now, thinking we took something. They tried to take everything from her. He showed up and signed. I heard he said sorry. A word is just a word without the action. He told her he loved her. He loved the idea of my daughter, not the woman standing in front of him. You ruined the word, was all she said. She wanted a better love. When he left, I saw my Jess again. She went out with her friends that night. It wasn't a party. It was just her finally getting to breathe. She came home, to her old room. They'd say it was for my money. It was just for a place she was loved. He called. She turned her phone off. Done. His family's dead weight was no longer her problem. Monday, she suited up for work. They thought we were a messy chapter. They were just a footnote in hers. I knew this was coming when she sold that car. He called it a gift. She knew it was a chain. His family never thought she was good enough. They never understood she was more than they deserved. She drove to work, leaving it all behind. I sat in the kitchen and thanked God she was strong enough. I could see her walking into her office, back where people saw her as capable, not just convenient. Work wasn't an escape. It was who she was, the part they couldn't control. He needed her to prop up his family. Let them feel shame. I don't. Our family name is the name of a daughter who fought for herself. That office was the only place she was still Jess. When home got hard, she ran toward her sanity. Their rumors are just noise. We opened our home to them. We didn't take a thing. We took our daughter back. I heard Sharon laughed. Found my daughter's fight for survival funny. Their loyalty was a one-way street. The townhouse. I knew from day one. Not a home for my daughter, but an asset for their future. Her lawyer asking about further issues. Good. Brian was just a tool for his family's greed. I bet Sharon thinks she's lining up new men. The idea of a woman being okay alone is alien to them. Move fast, that's Sharon's motto. As if my daughter had an expiration date. They only saw property. The life they offered was a beautiful cage. This wasn't fixing a mistake, it was a jailbreak. It's simple. She was too good for all of them, and they just couldn't stand it. I saw that picture he posted, a single steak. The most pathetic grab for pity I have ever seen. Dinner for one. A calculated post to make her look cruel. They weren't being graceful. They were writing a script. The night I met Sharon, she asked how many properties I owned. It wasn't small talk, it was an appraisal. The lie about his startup. They wanted her house, her grandmother's house, for it. When she said no, she became the villain. My wife, Sarah, told her to call a lawyer. Her friends, too. They saw the sharks. It was a rescue mission. Sarah brought home a cake. Happy Freedom Day. Because that's what it was. We were celebrating her resurrection. That life was a prison. We were just glad she finally remembered she had everything she needed before him. While he was back in his childhood room, my daughter slept through the night in hers. Our house was peaceful. She's a Miller, thank God. Their name is a corporation. Ours is just a family. She was never theirs to own. They called it an attack when her friend posted a photo of Jess smiling. Her happiness was an offense to them. The internet called them what they were, grifters, a mama's boy. They aired their dirty laundry and got mad when people pointed out the stains. I could feel Sharon's words coming through his phone. One last pathetic attempt to paint their greed as some kind of family value. That text wasn't from him. It was a script, a justification for trying to own my daughter, to control what was hers. Pure manipulation. Jess sent back just 2 words. Message received. Then she blocked him. I saw the weight lift right off her. It wasn't a surrender. It was relief. I drove her to the closing. A 2-hour drive and we didn't say a thing. I just had to be the wall at her back. She needed to know I was there. He wasn't there to plead. He was there to intimidate. His hand on the contract was a final power play. I knew it was done when I saw him walk away empty. Her lawyer stayed cold, professional. It's what Jessica needed. He wanted a scene, but she just wanted the deal closed for good. He made some weak little threat at the end, called it a joke. Nobody laughed. They just ignored his last childish bid for control. They had to escort him out. He made his choice. She wasn't breaking his heart. She was signing the deed to her own future. The money had always been hers. This was never about us. It was about her standing up to a family who thought they were entitled to it. I'm a rich bitch now. I can almost hear her saying it to Olivia, the way soldiers joke after a battle, a toast to finally being untouchable. The rumors started flying. I knew Sharon would be first in line, spinning any story that made her precious son the victim. Brian was already trying to move on, or more likely, his mother was shoving him back onto the market to save face. He said he wanted a woman with drive. He meant a woman with a bank account. Jess wasn't being cruel. She was just telling the truth. Good. That was all my daughter said. She poured a glass of wine to celebrate her freedom, and I saw my kid's real smile for the first time in a year. She seemed lighter, and why wouldn't she? She'd finally dropped a man-child and his overbearing mother. His profile said self-made. That kid never made anything but a mess his family had to pay for. Jessica earned that laugh. $1.35 million. That was the price of her freedom. And for protecting it, they called us the bad guys. She went out that night with her friend. Not to find someone new, but just to feel the quiet of being herself again. Burying trash. A dark joke, I know. But after everything, it felt right. The trash had finally taken itself out. He wanted a partner to build with. He meant he needed a backer for whatever scheme he'd cooked up next. That's not a marriage. He mistook her calm for being cold. It wasn't. It was peace. The kind you feel when you finally stop caring enough to be angry. A celebration with her lawyer. Good. That woman earned her fee. They weren't celebrating his loss. They were planning her future. She looked like herself again. Like the daughter I knew before all this. Not the ghost who'd been living in her skin. Let them whisper about me. I didn't care. My only job was my daughter, not the opinions of the people who tried to ruin her. Bringing up my other daughter's marriage was a new low, a pathetic shot to imply our family was the problem all along. That lawyer mentioned karma. Maybe he's right. The Collins family's bill finally came due, and it was about damn time. This wasn't karma. It was a prenup, a damn good lawyer, and a daughter who knew her worth. And it was a father who'd drive all night to make damn sure they knew it too. Then the two of them, Brian and his father, finally showed their faces. He called it courage, leaving after 3 months. That's what she told me. I call it finding the coward's way out. And his friend was still whispering in her ear, giving her 2 cents. The world against my daughter, a helpless feeling for a father. She saw him with someone else and told me he was still a gentleman. I could hear her trying to force the words out, to be the good guy one last time. Then she said it. She felt nothing, an empty space where he used to be. That's when I knew my daughter was coming back to me. We lost something, not the fight, but the girl who believed in stories like that. What we got back was a woman who knew she could always land here, with us. She came home, moved right back into her old bedroom. It felt like we were all trying to undo it, to erase the part of the story that had gone so wrong. Her mom put the old pictures on her nightstand, and when Jess broke down in her arms, the weight of my own silence crushed me. I should have stopped this. Some people see family as a transaction, a practical blessing, they called it. To me, it looked like a hostile takeover from day one. My daughter's beautiful house was just another asset on their balance sheet. They called it easing her burden. I called it picking a carcass clean. They said she was naive, that our money made her soft. They thought she'd just hand it all over. They mistook a good heart for a weak mind. The night they moved in felt like a violation. I heard Sharon took the master bedroom for herself. The nerve of that woman still gets me. He kept talking about our home. Jess told me his arm around her felt like the bars of a cell. I saw it on her face, the exact moment the trap shut. That new coldness they complained about? That was just her eyes opening. She was finally seeing the parasites she'd let into her house. Con artists. That's what she called them. In her own home, she found the words I'd been biting back for a year, and I had never been more proud. I'm sure he begged her to be reasonable. Their kind of reasonable always meant she had to be the one to lose. She was done with their version. She just pointed to the door, told them to leave. They'd cry about family later, I'm sure, but they were never her family. I knew it from the start. That last message, "You need me," wasn't begging. It was a threat. The second she blocked his number, she started getting her life back. I heard he shook with rage. Not a broken heart, just a broken plan. He'd lost his meal ticket, and that's all it ever was. Then came the news about his mother's failing heart. It sounded more like her consequences were finally catching up with her. They built their entire broken family on my daughter's foundation. The moment she kicked them out, the whole damn thing collapsed. Now they're crying about the stability they felt was stolen. They forget it was never theirs to begin with. I heard she's talking to a lawyer. Good. She needs a man who can build his own house, not try to take hers. I see their whole greedy plan now, just as I saw it that first day in Sharon's eyes. Their only mistake was thinking my girl was weak. That cold dread they must be feeling. I felt that for 2 solid hours driving to Jess, knowing I'd let that wolf right through her door. They never saw her as a person, just a key. When the key wouldn't turn, they decided to just break the lock. They didn't just want her money, they wanted her life, to build on her strength. But my daughter refused to be their foundation. I'm sure their regret is a heavy weight, but my pride in my daughter, that's a force of nature. It's everything. That woman thought she was saving her family. Instead, all she did was teach her son how to sink right alongside her. She didn't lose her boy to my daughter. She lost him the moment she decided my kid was just a resource to be stripped for parts. This isn't some kind of victory, it's just my daughter, standing on her own feet in her own house, finally breathing. Sharon wanted a fortress and ended up with rubble. I just wanted my daughter to be happy. I'll settle for her being this strong. Every selfish choice they made probably felt reasonable to them, and every single one of them felt like another knife in my girl's back. When I finally got to her house, I saw the wreckage, but it was them buried under it, not her. She was the one left standing. It must be a terrible thing to finally realize you're the monster. It's a wonderful thing to watch your child slay it. All they have now is the quiet and the weight of what they did. My daughter has quiet too. She earned hers. It's called peace.